Welcome back to another episode of the Randy Wilson Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Wilson, and today we are back at the Creative Playground, 715 East 4th Street here in South Richmond. Phenomenal venue and space for your events, your live recordings, your commercials, whatever the case is. If you want to find a nice venue, hit up Sharon here at the Creative Playground. Again, that's 715 East 4th Street, South Richmond. Today, I'm very excited to sit down and talk with two very distinguished gentlemen about the Shockoe Institute. We're going to get a little bit into their personal story, learn a little bit about their vision, and just really excited about that. Before we do, you got to hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, tell somebody, share the word, spread the news. That's what the purpose of content creation is for, all right? You can find this podcast everywhere podcasts are played, but if you're listening in your car, I'm gonna encourage you when you get to a stable place to go over to YouTube because we are sitting with these brothers today live videotaping this episode. So make sure you check that out and go over to randywilsonpodcast.com to see it. You can see it there as well. We don't often support our own platforms enough. We just talk about Spotify and everything else. But randywilsonpodcast.com, I got my own domain, so you can check out that as well. While you're at it, follow me on Instagram too, okay? We're gonna take care of all that business there, okay, before we get into this conversation. But today, this is about the Shockoe Institute, a newly launched cultural and historical venue that's being built here at the main street station in Richmond, Virginia. And it's intended as a contemporary space to understand and reflect on the city's role in the U.S. domestic slave trade. $11 million is going into this renovation. And Devon Henry, the CEO of Team Henry Enterprises, is leading the construction side of this project. And Marland Buckner is the executive director, CEO of the Shockoe Institute. And his focus, obviously, is to focus on historical integrity and the public engagement piece with this project. So we're really excited to talk to these brothers today. And first, before we get into the conversation, I kind of just want you to open up. We want to learn a little bit about you personally. Devon, I know that you was the leader in removing 24 Confederate monuments across South, not across South Richmond, but obviously the 24 Confederate monuments here in the South that was on monument here in Richmond. You led that project, and I can only imagine that contributed to helping prepare you for this moment. By the way, you look like you're a Norfolk State alumni.
Big time.
One shout them out, and you got the green,
time.
and you got the green on too.
I always represent the green and gold. Norfolk State University alum, class of 2000. I also had the great fortune of serving as the big rector, so chaired the board of visitors, appointed 2 times by the governor to do so. So one of the great highlights of my life is being able to give back to my alma mater. So thanks for recognizing the merch here and the shout out of Norfolk State. But yeah, I mean the point that you just made around, and it's been over. It's more than 24 Confederate iconography and statues across the southeast of the country, and that part of my life was a very interesting stage. You learned a lot about people. You learned a lot about humanity. But you also learn a lot about yourself in doing things like that. And when things are on the line, and should the time come where you have to make a really courageous decision or a decision where it's bigger than you, how do you respond to that, right? And so I feel that those type of projects, and we also built memorials to enslaved laborers and to those that were never recognized, and those that built this country and never had the recognition. So we do that. And then to take down Confederate statues, yeah, we're a very unique person and company, and those things prepared me to walk in this space now that I feel like this is purpose-driven for me to be the man and lead a company and a team of folks that has the willingness and feel the need to take projects like this from a vision of those and turn it into something that's tangible and that can be very special for those that will be able to visit it.
Beautiful. I would say you're living in your purpose right now.
It sure feels that way.
That's amazing. Marland, Executive Director of the Shockoe Institute, Executive Director, CEO sounds better, Chief Executive Officer, we're gonna get that right. And you also have worked at Microsoft, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah.
Just give me a little bit about your career. You've worked
Sure.
in the U.S. Senate, public policy. So
Yeah.
where are you from?
Sure. I was born in Los Angeles. I grew up and was educated in Canada, and came back down here to Virginia, to William and Mary specifically, over 30 and change years ago, to finish my graduate studies. I wanted to be a college professor when I grew up, but I ended up very quickly gravitating to Washington, D.C. I got a job at the Federal Judicial Center in Washington, D.C., worked at a couple of think tanks, and ended up working on Capitol Hill, and spent a number of years on Capitol Hill, both in the House, in the Senate, worked for Senator Schumer, and I was the chief of staff to Congressman Harold Ford Jr. when I was in the House. All of that preceded then going to Microsoft. So I worked in public policy, running for a number of years, and then started my own public policy shop based in D.C. and we work globally. Did that for 15 years, but apropos of Devon's point about finding your purpose, having the opportunity to envision and bring the capital to bear to create the Shockoe Institute really is very much back to the future. When I went to William and Mary, as I said, those 30-some years ago, I was going to teach African American history. That was the career path that I was on. Life had a different path for me, but it brought me all the way back here. And I think, as I've watched what Devon has done, and I have watched the intentionality with which he has built a very, very successful business with a national footprint and a national orientation that is dedicated to creating the kinds of memorials, the sorts of which had never previously existed. That to me is the kind of partner that I wanted. So when the city selected Devon as and selected Team Henry as the entity to build the Shockoe Institute, we just couldn't have been more pleased. I would say parenthetically, we created a public-private partnership with the city to build the institute. I wanted this to be done with and in concert with the city of Richmond, because I thought that was really, really important. And so we went to New York, and we raised the money, $11 million, as you said. The Mellon Foundation and their president and CEO, Elizabeth Alexander, came to Richmond. I pitched her on this vision, and she agreed that this is what we should do. We built a partnership with the city, and that's how. That's the short version of how all of this came to be.
Devon, where are you from originally?
Newport News, Virginia.
Okay, so I see how you went to Norfolk State.
Yeah.
So I see your draw here. You're from the West Coast originally. William and Mary, though, I guess was the introductory to Virginia for you. Is that correct?
Not really, no. Even though my family is principally from as far back as we can trace. We have been able to trace that we were freed in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. That much we know. And then my family were a part of the Exodusters that went west, and so we were in Oklahoma and Kansas, and that's where my granddaddy was born. That's where my daddy was born, and then everybody kind of went out from there to New York and to L.A.
Marland, because of your background, how was you identified or selected to be the CEO of this organization?
Well,
and I'm asking that question because to preface that, I'm curious of what the draw to Richmond, Virginia was. With Devon, he's homebred. He grew up eating cornbread and potatoes right around the corner in Tidewater.
Sure.
With you being West Coast guy, working in DC, kind of a little bit different background. I'm just curious of how you was, what was the selection process? What was that like in coming
Sure.
here?
Well, I guess to be candid, it was a self-selection process. I raised the money. So, no other way to put it. I don't know. We should put it differently, Devon.
No, that's good.
That's fair.
That's the best way.
This was, and I really, look, honestly, I was like, look, I'm going to bring the same approach to creating the Institute that I brought to being in the private sector for the better part of 20 years. So, you go out, you raise the capital, you go to investors, whether they're philanthropic, market, whomever, you raise the capital, you create the business. It was exactly the same approach.
Got it.
Randy, the same approach. But to answer your question more directly about kind of why here and the draw and so forth, we lived in D.C. My wife and I lived in D.C. For a long, long time, a couple of decades. And after she left the White House, we were looking to just say, okay, well, where can we really be of use? And we decided that because of the things that were happening in Richmond, because of its importance, we wanted to come to a place where we felt like we could bring the gifts and opportunities that we've been given to bear in a place where we could see the needle move and really have an impact. That's why we came here. We wanted to be of use. Now, it didn't hurt that my wife is actually from Richmond. She's 5 generations deep.
Okay.
So she's about as Richmond as you get.
Yeah.
But that's not why we came here. We came here because we wanted to be of use. That's why we're here.
My wife's from Richmond too. She reminds me every day that I'm not
Transplant.
RVA. So, the Shockoe Institute is described as a gateway to understanding Richmond's role in the domestic slave trade. What does that mean in practice?
Sure. In practice, it means 3 things. That we are a place of learning, of reflection, and of action. The space that Devon is building for us right now and that our exhibition designers have completed their work on will first be a place of learning. You're going to experience in about 10,000 or so square feet a kind of a museum-like experience. We don't have artifacts, but there's going to be an immersive educational experience in that 10,000 square feet. Learning. Reflection. When you leave that 10,000 square feet, you're going to come into what we're calling our lab. The lab is a place where you can extend your learning journey with our content management system and with other tools. You'll have a chance to reflect about what you've learned in the lab. Action. The third piece, perhaps the most important. We're not just going to leave people with that which they've learned and that upon which they've reflected, but we want to create opportunities for people to act on what they have learned and on their reflections. And over the course of the coming months, we're going to have some very specific announcements that are going to relate to programs that we will be running at the Institute, not just in the lab, but elsewhere. We're going to be testing some of those programs in what we're calling our mobile lab series, both in Alexandria at the end of May and in Charlottesville in the early fall. So we're a place of learning, reflection, and of action.
Great. The Institute, as you spoke to, is being built inside the historic Main Street station. Why was this location chosen, and what symbolism does it carry? And can you speak to how the space was being used prior?
Well, the space had been vacant since the completion of the renovation of the train shed. The ground floor, the first floor on the north side of Main Street Station had been used, basically for event space and other things. So it was a really interesting opportunity to activate not just part of Main Street Station, but to begin to think about how to activate a part of the immediate Shockoe Bottom area immediately adjacent to Lumpkin's Jail, as you know, to begin to give people a sense of what actually happened right there. The station itself is in some ways emblematic. By the 1850s, people that looked like us were being sold south and taken there, forced marched, not just on foot, not just by boat, either down the Mississippi or on the coastal routes, but also by rail. Railways were part of the technological progress of the making of America, and they played a significant role in how we as capital and as commodities were moved into the South to create more wealth for this country.
How would the use of immersive technology and multimedia storytelling help visitors engage with such a difficult and emotional history?
My hope is that we're going to be able to create in a smaller space and use tools to to give visitors the same kind of amazing, rich experience that they have when they visit the places that Devon has built. And in that way, I mean, I see us as being in common cause. Devon has already created these places for people to visit. So when you come to the Shockoe Institute and you have that immersive experience, you will be a part of work that this brother has already led the way on.
Devon, can you share with us some of the spaces that you've created?
Yeah, so I think there's a few that just stand out, and when you talk about the ability to come somewhere and emotion just starts to take over, right? So at the University of Virginia, they were courageous enough to say we need to do something to tell the full story of actually who built the university. Because everyone would tell you it was Thomas Jefferson, and he was just the president and he was an architect, but whose hands, whose labor, whose back was put into making sure this university was what it was, and that was not just the building, but the upkeep, the maintenance, taking care of people. And when you have the opportunity to come in and first speak to those that are direct lineage, descendants of those that were enslaved, and understand their emotion, understand how they feel, understand what they would like to see, you get that perspective. And then you have the design piece that you have to, take all these things in consideration, the symbolism of what you want to put into this space, and then what the emotion you want folks to take away from it, right? And once you have these things in play, for me, and so we're a general contractor. Let's be clear. Like, so we build banks, schools, multifamily homes, apartments. So we do all the big things, too, hospitals. But this is the work that has touched me, right? Because of what I just described. And so we've at University of Virginia, it's called the Memorial to Enslaved Laborers. And it's an amazing piece of architecture that you come into this open space and it has names that were etched into this granite stone. And folks can see the names of those that were on this campus, on the grounds, that means something to them, right? And then it's a full grass on area. It's a water feature. There's places that tell parts of the story from a timeline that are, quite honestly, kind of disturbing to read, right? Where you're talking about property, where you're talking about how someone raped a young girl, black girl, and the reason why they got in trouble is because you damaged someone else's property, not because of what you've done. So when you have the ability and the willingness to take on these type of projects, I'll tell you, Randy, taking on these sort of projects, it's not easy. The statues is a whole different animal, but this type of work, we don't get as much buy-in from our subcontractor market, right? Because if we're going to be honest, in construction is
They don't want to.
white.
Some people don't want to contribute to this.
It's a white male dominant
Yeah.
space, right? And
Yeah.
I respect it. I know it. I know what it is,
Yeah.
right? But I know what we've done in this space for the last 20 years to be a reputable, nationally known contracting firm. So we have our relationships that when we put out a solicitation for J.P. Morgan Bank, right? We get a book of subcontractors that are willing to come in and play, right? When we put out for the Institute or for the University of Richmond or for UVA, the book is much smaller. Those that are willing to participate is much smaller. And I have to be realistic in what the cost on these projects are. Because if I'm being honest, I've left millions of dollars on the table because I did not want to put this project out of reach of what the budget is, and then it doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Yeah. But that's real talk. Because there are others that would just come out and throw a number at it that's $2 million more than mine, but it doesn't cost that much. I just want to make a fair wage and do something that's going to be impactful, not just for me, not just for the city, but for the folks that come behind us and for the country can learn something from. So when I talk about the memorial to enslaved laborers and what we're doing now at the University of Richmond, and what we're doing with the first building, first home that was owned by a black man in Jackson Ward, these are projects that have the ability for you to walk away from there and say, wow, either I didn't know or I'm glad I know.
Wow.
Right? That's where I'm at.
See how these are all interconnected, right? I mean, all of this work, that's why I'm so glad to be working with this brother. I mean, he first of all, he brings a national, actually an international perspective. He understands this purely from the perspective of conscience, which is the first and most important point of departure. But he has created, I think it's fair to say, an ecosystem into which the Shockoe Institute steps into an existing ecosystem. But what we got to do is execute on exactly what Devon is saying. We've got to knit these institutions, these locations, these places, these experiences. We've got to knit them together and make them make sense to folks, so that when they go, as we did last weekend, to Monticello or to UVA, that they understand that the very names that you see when you visit there had family members who were sold away through Shockoe Bottom, through Richmond, and they would never be seen or heard from again. We've got to begin to connect these narratives so that we can position the work that we are doing in a national way, so that folks across the country understand how important all of these places are in our whole national narrative.
Devon, both of you spoke to Devon having an international, national presence. You're a young brother in this. What was the onset? Did you inherit some skills from a father? Like what was? Take me back to the foundation of what has now built such a established, way more than just a construction company here.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's nice to be inherit some things, right? And I did not grow up with a father. My mother raised me, so what I inherited was her determination, her grit, and her willingness to never give up, right? And so my mother had me. She was pregnant when she was 15. She had me when she was 16, in Lumberton, North Carolina. A very tough area.
I'm from North Carolina.
And so it was determined that she was never going to be anything, right? But she said, I need to figure out how I'm going to take care of this kid. And normally in our communities, the mother's mother would step in and she could be the big mama. My mother's mother passed away 30 days after I was born. So she had a different walk in life that I was front row to see, because we grew up together. So she started working at McDonald's when she was 17 years old, moved to Newport News, Uptown to be exact, and working at McDonald's, starting out with, you want fries with that and all this kind of jazz, to, in 2001, she became the first black woman to own five McDonald's in the Richmond area.
Wow.
So to see the progress, to see someone believe in you that you didn't even believe in yourself.
This your mother, right?
It's my mother.
You need to say her name.
Yeah. My mother, Frida, big Frida. My motivation, my inspiration, the person who has shown me, it's just gonna be things.
So you're kin to the Henry brother that was from Virginia State.
Rodney, that's my
Rodney,
brother.
that's your brother?
My younger brother, yeah.
I've heard this story before.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I did not put the dots together, but because it ain't every day you find out about a black woman who's opened up multiple McDonald's franchises. And I don't know Rodney, but I know Rodney.
Sure.
I did not know that y'all. That is a small world.
That's my baby brother, and so when you talk about the inheritance, right?
Wow.
It was much greater than money. It was much greater than given an opportunity. It was the front row view of seeing someone that that had every reason to say, I'm done. I'm going to
Yeah.
quit. But persevere and pull through. So when the time came for me to answer the call, because everyone gets this, at some point in your life, should the time come that something's greater than you or that you have to step out and do something, I've seen this
That's beautiful.
play out.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, does mom still got the McDonald's?
So mother has taken a very more laid back role, and she's moved to Charleston, South Carolina, whereas she had 5 McDonald's here. She has 2 there, and living her best life.
That's good. Is Rodney in the McDonald's business?
So Rodney just became an actual owner. He is down in Charlotte, your stomping grounds. So my brother Rodney now is in Charlotte, in your stomping grounds, with his first McDonald's. Super excited for him, and he's trying to figure things out as well.
Good.
So
Hey, for those who listen, we apologize for the noise. I think the team Henry's up here got something. Y'all building something around. Y'all building something
I mean,
around
it
the
ain't too
corner.
late, man. They might need me.
No, that's a pretty cool story, man. Do you build these McDonald's?
So we did not start out building McDonald's. Up until 2 years ago, we became it's a very complex situation of how, conflicts and all this other jazz. But the short answer today is, yeah, we build and renovate McDonald's today.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. All right. Marland, you emphasize that these are all of our stories. How do you plan to make the Shockoe Institute a place for collective reflection and healing?
Yeah, thank you for
I want to
asking
come in
that.
there and be a part of it. Do this right here.
Oh, count on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
You have
absolutely.
to.
Count. Thank you for, we rush to accept your kind offer. Yes. You're putting your finger on one of the toughest things, one of the toughest questions that we have to answer in 3 dimensions, if you will. We got to answer that question in terms of the visitor experience. What is that visitor going to feel, and how are they going to understand themselves to be a part of the history that they're learning? We've got to create conditions so that visitors can, after they have that experience, think about our world today and see themselves and their own story in the story of others, in the stories of others, many or most of whom may not look like them. And if we do those first 2 things, then maybe the hardest thing to do is to get people to convert those lessons and that reflection into action, into the kinds of work and activities in our communities that will make this place, Richmond, the region, this place we call America, better than we found it. So you've put your finger, Randy, on in many ways, the essential question. And I'm really glad that I think we're going to give people, I hope that people will go through the Institute, work in our lab, and take action afterwards that says, I may not have done that. My family may not have owned slaves. I might not even be from here. But the America that I live in comes as a result of this history. And as a result, if I am here, that is a part of my story.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing, I think. That's the highest hurdle we got to clear.
I'm a transplant here. I saw someone on Facebook the other day make that post in a less intelligent way of saying it. They said, tired of you people in Richmond continuing to tell us people who are not from Richmond that we're not from Richmond. We know that. But a lot of that is trauma. A lot of it is trauma. A lot of people are holding on to something, It's interesting, though. In order for us to go forward, though, it's going to take who's here and also some people who's not here to move the city forward. And
So can I add? I mean, the beauty of sitting next to a brother like Marland, and the ability that he has to articulate and see something, right? And see a need for something, and then know where to go to help fund said
Yeah.
thing, which
That's the key.
is amazing right now. I mean, it takes a lot of courage for folks to step out right now in
Yeah.
the climate that we're in. But a lot of times when the discussion around race or slavery comes up, we have the tendency to speak out of emotion, right? We well, you don't know how I feel, and you can't tell me how I should feel. But sometimes the data is just the data, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to get immersed into truly understanding the tentacles of this slave trade and how it's impacted folks for centuries.
Yeah.
And that is the prayer for me, is that the Institute and other international organizations will come to realize that there's a story that's told through data, through reflection, through real things, right? And I bring that up because I was told to stop reading the comments when I was taking down statues. And people said they won't kill me and my family, and it messed with me, right?
Sure.
Mentally. And I saw some of the articles that came out about the Institute, and I just crept on down to the comments just to see what was said. And there were some folks that were saying, well, why do we need to spend money on something that we know? Do you really know? And do you really understand the impact that it's had, not just on black folk, but America?
Right.
And why we are where we are today?
Exactly.
Yeah, you hit on something. I think you kind of see. I like how this conversation is going because I have a question that's going to speak to that. How are we involving the descendants of our enslaved people in the broader community, shaping the Institute's narrative and programming? And I want to ask, I should have led with this. Before you answer that question, you're obviously a super intelligent guy. When you was prepping on how to go about getting this money, though, you knew where you was going off the gate, or was it did you have to do some research and investigating, or did you just know, like, hey, I know an organization that's committed to this cause? Sorry, I threw two at you at one time.
No, I appreciate that because
I mean, that's a gift.
yeah,
You got a gift, but it's a gift in knowing how to go get it also.
it speaks to something, Randy, you said a moment ago about how we think about approaching challenges here in Richmond. It speaks to the perspective that Devon brings to all of his projects. I mean, I would, think about the word I like to use a lot, but listen to the way Devon describes his business, the interdisciplinarity with which he approaches his business. I heard him say everything from banks to multifamily. I mean, those are a lot of different disciplines that he speaks to and brings to bear. I think if we pull back a little bit and we ask ourselves, all right, how are we going to solve or help be a part of the solution to some of the problems we have in Richmond? I say two things. God, number one, we have a very, very nice airport. We need to use it. You got to get on planes. You got to go places. You got to ask people for money. And when you go to ask, you got to add zeros. Okay? We are not going to solve any of the problems that we have in this town in $50,000 or $100,000 increments. It is not going to happen. All right?
Period.
Get out of town and add zeros to the ask.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
That's part of my problem in this podcast. I don't ask for sponsors. I've worked harder on the podcast than I have on the business of the dollars to support and back it. I feel like that was a word I needed today.
That has been the nature of. So I mentor a lot of, small women, black-owned businesses, and we're great operators. At what we do. The issue has been, and I've been there, and when I learned to work on the business and not so much just in the business, that's when things started flourishing.
Yeah.
Because you got to be able to realize all the back end stuff and what the back end stuff costs and how do you scale.
Yeah.
Because that's where the back end is where you scale.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
But when you think about we oftentimes look back on this history, and people will often reflect on, oh, well, that was so long ago, and so on and so forth. When you count it in terms of we also like to use the term generational wealth. Yeah, we were once generational wealth, and it was but a very few generations ago that people like us were the wealth. And so it is, I think, patently unreasonable, and that's being charitable about it, to expect an enormous segment of society who had for most of its history been a commodity and been capital to be able to dial into a way of thinking about generational wealth creation when every single avenue of opportunity had been closed off. I mean, we are only now in still the first generations of black folks in America that have any wealth at all. And we are still in single digit percentages lower on average per household than the average white household.
Yeah. So speak to the descendants of slaves piece. Like, have you had time to do that yet? Like, look at the descendants, and figure out how you can incorporate them into this mission.
Yeah, we have, and we've been learning a lot from the descendant community, certainly in Charlottesville, where they've been doing really terrific work. There are a number of efforts, kinfolkology being one of them. There are a variety of different databases that have been created just over the course of the last 15 to 20 years. So we actually now, for the very first time, because of big data, have access to the tools that it would take to put together the kinds of genealogical information that will allow us to begin to actually get at that question or those questions, Randy. But in terms of our practical
Kinfolkology?
Yeah.
That's a thing.
Yeah. Our practical work will initially probably will probably try to figure out how to be a constructive participant in that process. There are others who are expert in that field. I want to bring them to the Institute and let them teach us how we can be useful.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. I got about 5 more questions here. Appreciate the flow, and this is good. This is going to be good for my audience. It's going to be, again, what I expect it to be. It's going to be an educational. It's going to be informative. Just think there's so much we don't know. Yeah. And I think that you guys present in a way that people receive comfortably. Telling our history, quite frankly. How does the Shockoe Institute fit into the larger national movement? I feel like Devon I had this question coming, and I feel like he kind of opened it a few minutes ago, like in a national movement here, to re-examine public memory and monuments. How does the Shockoe Institute fit currently in that space?
I'm keen to hear your answer.
You're already on it.
Yeah.
This is just another one. I mean, not just another one.
Yeah.
But, and I'm sure this one probably hits. This one hits closest to home for you.
Well, no, they all mean
But this is
ton to
it's
me.
in your backyard, though.
It's in my backyard, and it's where I live, and I think it's where I would see the most, just because proximity. But what I like about, what I love about what the Institute will offer is the ability for folks to be able to, the lab, right? You can have, to Marland's point about the descendants, to be able to come in and do their thing. What we've established on most of these memorials is done, right? We've taken input. We've had the voice of the descendants. We had the voice of the communities, and we took all that information and we've done something beautiful with it that we hope they're proud of, right? What this is being built, in my mind, is to offer folks to be able to come in and help create and tell narratives, to tell stories that have been lost, that folks didn't know about. So how this, it's one of those things where the memorials are in stone and in place, or granite, or bronze. This is a continual story that we can continue to get better, to continue you talked about the message, right? And the messenger. And it always, when you have the ability to tell your story from your vantage point and how you or others have not been able to hear it. So this vessel offers them to be a messenger that they may not have had the voice or the opportunity to do so. So this is a very, very, very important piece of the puzzle of not just the remembrance of a memorial, but for folks to come in and allow them to have a voice. I think it's going to be beautiful.
I think our ability to our ability to give visitors the experience that Devon has just described iteratively will absolutely help to ensure, Randy, that 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 the memorials that Devon has built, however static they may be physically, are dynamic narratively and emotionally. In other words, people can come to the Institute, they will learn, they can then go back to the memorials that Devon has built, and they will come with a different perspective. They will come with more information and knowledge and data and evidence, and they will reflect in those spaces differently than they might have previously. And so I do think, as I said earlier, that we're engaged in common cause here. I think that, a big part of what we want to create for people is also the opportunity to experience the creative dimension. Our founding artistic director, Layla McCullough, who just joined us, who's obviously of international stature, will be curating over the course of the next couple of years creative work from all disciplines and dimensions that will be seen and showcased. Again, not just in the lab, but well beyond. And that's part of, I think, where we really want to make sure that people understand that their stories, no matter where they may sit in the country or in the culture, that they're invested by definition in these stories, in these narratives. And we want to give them every chance to experience that possible.
It's my hope that that you guys will have an ability to influence, at minimum, Richmond Public Schools from sharing our history. At large, the state of Virginia, with being a contributor to help, and I'm sure it's going to take some political ties, but I'm sure you guys are on that. But that's kind of what I see. That's my hope, that this project can be a contributor in that space.
Well, you talk about students and the public school system. I mean, just schools in general, and the what you're seeing with books coming out, and you're seeing, teachers not being able to celebrate Black History Month and be able to talk about some of the great leaders that maybe, some of the students never knew about. This is going to be on steroids for them to have the opportunity to come and just be immersed in what we hope, in my prayer, is that they will be able to walk away with just something that they just had no idea ever existed. That's my hope.
I couldn't agree more. And I would only add that if you believe in the promise of America, if you believe that the story of America is the story of the struggle to expand human freedom, if you believe that, then you have nothing to fear from the facts. You have nothing to fear from the reality of the history, the data, the evidence that we will show. None of us have anything to fear from that, because we are moving forward and we can move forward. And the only thing that will keep us from doing that is fear of the facts that are as real as you and I sitting here today.
Amen.
Amen to that. Got two more questions. What's been the most challenging aspect of bringing this project to life?
Overcoming what we might broadly describe as a bias toward inaction. That's been the hardest piece of this, is saying we're going to do this and then doing it. Getting people over the hump. You used the word trauma earlier. Mm-hmm. That's very real in this town. The scars are deeper than people realize, far deeper and far older. But we gotta turn the prism. We've got to turn the corner. We've got to say to ourselves, we are going to act. Enough talking, enough theorizing. Mm-hmm. Pretty pictures are great. I like shovels in the dirt. That has been the biggest challenge, is overcoming a bias toward inaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My challenges are a little different. Whereas, we've had to battle. I mean, it's one thing just as an employer today, trying to find good people, right?
Yeah.
My level of trying to find good people has heightened to a level I don't think many can experience because of the work that we've done, right? And understanding who the biggest labor pool and what they look like, right? So they don't necessarily want to when we have an ad or we have folks that are positioned that are out in the atmosphere for a superintendent or a project manager, they'll apply, and then when they do the research and find out who we are, they won't even show up for the interview, or they come to the interview and say, "Oh, we'll never work for you." Right? So overcoming the odds that people just they have no clue of what's attached to the work that we do. But being a leader in this space, you got to be, you got to be willing to take on things like that, right? And you got to find other ways and other people who are willing to stand in this space and say, "Yes, I believe in what you're doing, and I'm willing to stand with you." So finding good people who are down to do this work, yeah. Like I said, I have all the other types of scopes of work that we do, but we're attached to this work, right? And if you come to Team Henry, you're going to be attached to this work, whether you're on the project or not, right? So that is one big challenge that we have. And then there's two, the projects are never, they have some of the best architects and the greatest visionaries that you can imagine on these projects, right? So it's never the rudimentary, just, walls that
Yeah,
are,
that's what I was-
four
yeah.
walls, you know what I'm saying?
Not a lot of
It's the
straight lines.
curviest, the walls are curving. You have the highest level of audio visual. And so I have the added pressure of doing it for the culture, right? That we're going to bring it to fruition. We're going to bring what you drew and what your vision was to life, and we're going to do it at the highest level of craftsmanship. So we do that every day, but it's heightened because who I am and what the projects represent. So the challenges are there, but it's not something that we're unwilling to step forward and step into.
Yeah. I was thinking the materials.
Shit. That's a whole other conversation. We would start talking about tariffs and getting material to the job site.
Right? We got everything, right?
We close. No, and on this project, you mentioned it's in the historic Main Street station, right? So we have a history of bringing projects together that are historic nature. Richmond is an old city, right?
Yeah.
So just about any project you work on downtown has a historic nature to it. So being able to comply, being able to get to work with Department of Historic DHR, and making sure that we're in compliance and not doing something that will fall out, and then they look for any reason to say, no, pull that out, or that's not going to work, and delay things. So yeah, we on it, man. We see where the obstacles are, and we're just willing to step to them.
Last question. A moment throughout this process that has affirmed, I mean, I don't know if you needed a moment to affirm the importance of this work to you personally, but if you can share a moment, something that's happened maybe even since the ribbon cutting, or the thing, like something fresh, something new that you haven't shared with anybody else publicly, that's just affirmed, the importance of this project to you guys personally?
Well, I'll tell you this. I mean, I grew up in the public school system. My kids grew up in the public school system, and even, you know, the story of the Civil War, the story of who the Confederate folks were, it was never fully told, right? So you really don't have a true, you know, knowledge base of what was happening if you're listening or if you're being taught in school, right? You have to do your own, either in your homes, right? We're very intentional about what we teach in our house. But I never knew that the date that we did the actual breaking, that was the Emancipation Day for Richmond.
Yeah,
That was the day that they were freed in Richmond. So
And this
again,
was this about design or not design?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was
it
about,
was
okay.
Oh, yeah.
that's what I
Absolutely.
mean by
Yeah.
sitting next to someone who was incredibly just intentional and visionary to make these things mean something, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. And
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed to say that because every day we're learning, right? So that meant even more to understand that the day that we were doing that,
cool.
the symbolic nature of that, and for me and my team and all of us to come together in that moment and to be able to sign this beam that that symbolizes the beginning of what we were doing. It was just a very, very special day, man. And I wrote on there, Team Henry, Devon Henry, for our ancestors and for the culture today and forever.
Yeah, that day was particularly gratifying, and it was actually a little hard to hold it together initially. I think it was so important, Randy, because we were doing it, and it had felt like for a number of years there'd been just so much talk and so much conversation and so much going on, that to stand beside this brother and sign a piece of steel that is going into this facility, that I can't imagine, given what it's taken to get this far, I can't imagine a greater feeling. I only hope and pray that as we continue to stay on schedule and on budget,
With the tap.
and on budget, that when we invite everyone to experience the Institute when it opens, that we will have both of us together, that we will have done justice to those in whose names we are building this place.
Yeah, you guys have, man. A big thing for me with this podcast is I've always said it's been for the culture, from the culture. I might have to stop saying that so much because I do another podcast that's saying I'm saying it on both places. But at the end of the day, that's kind of that's what I'm about, and that's who we are. And I've always wanted my guests to be change makers, difference makers, and so you guys are the epitome of that. I mean, you talking about making a change, making a difference that that's going to go down in history, And I can only imagine how your children, your grandchildren, your family are looking at you right now, and then how the ancestors are looking at you. As you looked up, I thought about the ancestors just now. But, obviously you've been blessed. You've been blessed. And thank you just for continuing to be a blessing. Thank you for this educational experience. I mean, I talk to a lot of people about a lot of things, some intelligent, some ratchet.
I can do the ratchet too.
This right
Easy.
here, this right here was like a good hour worth of, learning something about what's to come. And so I'm really excited about it. I can't wait to be there to celebrate with you guys. And I'm just I'm happy for the city of Richmond, happy for the state, obviously, happy for the family members of those descendants also, who's getting the chance to see something that's kind of been talked about for a while, bringing something to the area like that. But now it's getting ready to come to fruition. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Share your information with the cameras in regard to how people can follow you, learn more about the Shockoe Institute, any of those things before we close.
Sure. Please follow us, shockoeinstitute.org. Go to our website, sign up for our Instagram, all of the platforms. But Shockoe Institute, all one word, .org, shockoeinstitute.org. That is where you find us. Please sign up for our newsletter, etc. And that's the best way to stay connected to us, to get announcements about all the work we're going to be doing in the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah, and for Team Henry Enterprises, www.teamhenryent.com. On Instagram, Team Henry ENT. If you want to learn more about me, what I'm doing, I'm traveling, having fun, keeping people in line, enjoying time with my family. You can follow me on Instagram, team_Henry. And then if you were looking for me to come find somebody, or looking for me to come speak or help you with one of your projects that are symbolic in nature or telling a story that needs to be told, DevonHenrySpeaks.com. I'm all around.
Thank you, guys. And some of you are going to be new to learning about me because of these gentlemen here. So again, it's Randy Wilson podcast everywhere, LinkedIn, Randy Wilson. If you're new to the show, make sure you tune in and engage and see more of the things that we've done. And we appreciate you tuning in. We're out.